Europe is more decisive than ever to stand for Ukraine as long as it needs. I wonder if that has anything to do with Trump's presidential anointment. Second topic, Zelensky announced Ukrainian long-range missiles being tested in Ukraine. And an interview with an expert, Alexander Hara, on China and the United States in the Ukrainian context. Of course, good afternoon. These topics in more detail in a daily episode with me, Henry Keenan, Native English, doing our best to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. Europe starts to realize what actually have to be grasped almost 3 years ago. EU must take on the historic responsibility of helping Ukraine for its own European sake, and especially in the wake of Trump's rise. So I guess, thank you, Mr. Trump, already for that, because better late than never, right? And Poland has shown bravery and strength and clearly stated the desire to become the driving force behind a new coalition of Ukraine's allies without Trump. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk will meet with the President of France, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the head of NATO and the leaders of the 8 countries, Northern Europe, that are Baltic states as well, to discuss transatlantic cooperation and the war in Ukraine. The future of aid to Ukraine is finally taken by new allies precisely as it should have been taken a long time ago, as an investment in Europe's own security, and no doubt one of the main issues the European Union is facing after Donald Trump's victory in the US elections.
There is no doubt that this new political landscape is a serious challenge for everyone, especially in the context of a possible end to the Russian-Ukrainian war as a result of an agreement between, for example, the President of Russia and the new President of the United States. In the coming days, we will very intensively coordinate cooperation with countries that have very similar views on the geopolitical and transatlantic situation and the situation in Ukraine. Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk.
Tusk said that French President Emmanuel Macron and NATO head Mark Rutte would soon visit Warsaw, and he would also meet with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, either in Warsaw or London. Tusk will also meet with the leaders of the 8 countries in Stockholm, in addition to France and UK and all Northern Europe. The new coalition of allies will include the Netherlands, Italy, the Czech Republic, Romania and some other countries in the Balkans and all of Eastern Europe. And starting around the new year, Kaja Kallas, former Prime Minister of Estonia, will become the EU's foreign policy chief, which will also hopefully shake up Europe a bit. And I would like to draw your attention to something else here. The UK Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, said that Russian troops were losing an average of 1,500 killed and wounded every day in October, bringing the toll of 700,000 and rising since the war began in February 2022. Sir Tony said the Russian people were paying, I quote, extremely high price, end of quote, for Putin's invasion.
Russia is on track to suffer 700,000 killed and wounded. That is the immense pain and suffering that Putin's ambitions have caused the Russian nation. These losses have been offset by only tiny gains in land, and Russia spends more than 40% of its public spending on defense and security, a huge burden. Western allies will remain resolute for as long as it takes. That is the message that President Putin should get, and that should reassure President Zelensky. Sir Tony Radakin, British Royal Navy Admiral.
With all due respect, Mr. Admiral, sir, you obviously know everything there is to know in military affairs and probably even beyond that. However, you know nothing about Russia and Russians in general and the dictator Vladimir Putin in particular. Let me please shed some light on the matter for you. Well, first things first. Every country has a national idea. A national idea of Russia is, we don't care. And that's what they're doing right now, not caring. The Russians openly spit on these losses, on the future into the face of the West, in your face, Admiral. While you are addressing Putin, he continues to bomb and shell peaceful cities in Ukraine, killing adults and children, while the timid West talks about determination and as long as it takes. Russians don't care. And this is exactly what the collective West will always fail to understand, how deep in the core of Russian mentality this indifference lies. This is what General Eisenhower failed to understand. He was horrified to learn how, at the end of the World War II, Joseph Stalin was going to demine thousands of square kilometers of land. With people, Admiral. Russians drove forward other Russians under the threat of immediate execution. Exactly the same thing is happening in Ukraine these days. And just like no one in Russia cared about it back then in World War II, Russians don't give a damn now. You probably hardly believe me, do you, Admiral? Well, I get it. It's unthinkable by a Westerner to suggest that human life can have not just small but negative value, and you can waste as many as hundreds, thousands, or even millions of Russian lives just to satisfy your ill territorial ambitions, and absolutely nothing will happen about it in Russia. Remember what Putin said in response to a Western journalist's question about what happened to the Russian submarine Kursk. It sank, he said. As an admiral of the British Navy, would it have occurred to you even to say something similar about the British sailors who died during the tragedy? And Putin did not allow or accept Western help, although the West offered it, and the Russian sailors could have been saved, but they're not worth it, Admiral, you see. If saved, Putin would have then to answer uncomfortable questions from journalists about the technical conditions of the submarine, etc., but as it is, all ends in the water in every sense. It sank. And that's it. Who cares? And the same thing is happening in Ukraine. 700,000 dead, or 1 million, or 2, or 5 million of Russian corpses until the subpoenas do not just go to Putin's criminal hordes, are not handed out in big cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg. Putin doesn't care. And as terrible as it is, neither do Russian people. For there is no Russian people, Admiral. There is no such thing as Russian nation ready to fight for its life and future against the tumor of dictatorship. No, the place of the people in Russia has long been taken by the population, an infantile crowd that enjoys all the benefits of Western civilization, yet hating the West so much for that it is ready to unite around the Kremlin in the name of the death, destruction, and murder. Don't get us wrong, Admiral. Everything you say is correct. And that's probably how it works. In the West. In Russia, no way. And the fact that you operate with facts does credit you because you, sir, are a British admiral. Just assuming that Putin will ever hear you, he won't care. After all, sir, you would be talking to a KGB midget who used the infantilism and the inertness of Russian population and managed to usurp power in Russia, and he abused the power just as any KGB midget would, starting a criminal war of conquest to please himself and the well-fed Philistines of all Mother Russia, whom you mistakenly called the people. The difference is that the people fight for their freedom, just as the Ukrainians do, and the population just doesn't care. In his recent evening address, Zelensky noted the production of Ukrainian weapons, emphasizing that Ukraine has surpassed the mark of producing the first 100 pieces, missiles, this year. Which missiles exactly is not specified yet, but obviously and hopefully, we're talking about strikes deep into Russia. We can also hope to be talking about the Neptunes, maybe improved for strikes against ground targets, or Palyanytsia. Yes, Palyanytsia, or even new Ukrainian ballistics, the testing of which Zelensky has already announced previously. But what we know is that experts assume that Kyiv is now stockpiling these missiles in order to then use them later as an argument during the negotiating track. I can't wait for that to happen. Not only because it will give us in Ukraine a chance to breathe out, as we had just one peaceful night over the past 2 months without Russian UAVs and missiles falling on our heads. But I would also love to see the faces of Putin's representatives in Europe, Viktor Orban, Robert Fico, Zara Wagenknecht, and other Kremlinites who would undoubtedly call it an act of Ukrainian aggression against peaceful Russia. And this is exactly where Russian propaganda has done its tremendous harm. It made some in the West actually believe that Russia is a peaceful country and Ukraine is quasi-Nazi state. And when Putin escalates and kills more civilians and their families in Ukraine, the world says it is a tragedy, but not yet an escalation. And these Ukrainian weapons will finally return us the right that always belonged to us, the right to call an escalation what we in Ukraine consider an escalation. As simple as that. And not those dudes in UN Security Council that allow themselves to be presided over a country run by a criminal indicted by ICC. Alexander Kara is with us tonight, an expert at Strategy Defense Center. Hello, Alexander.
Hello, how are you?
Well, lovely. I'm alive. That's something these days already. That was a second question, but I will slide it to the first one. Well, were you surprised by Trump's win?
Well, it was not out of the blue.
Mm.
We followed the opinion polls from the battleground states, and certainly it was obvious that two candidates are shoulder to shoulder. They were just with the just a number of margin between them. So it was obvious that someone is going to win, and there is a highly likely chance for Mr. Trump to get that. The other thing that we were surprised the how the Republicans have made in the Congress. So they took over the Senate, and they have a pretty good majority in the House.
Surprise is not the proper term for me, but some people in Ukraine and abroad, they tell me that it is good for Ukraine because actually Trump is the only one who acts, because what Democrats do, they just cede grounds to any opposing force, with this time Trump. And Trump was the one who propagated and who delivered the decision to deliver the lethal weapons for Ukraine. And money from Johnson also followed after Trump's pressure. So, do you personally think, I know this is too easy and too simple breaking it like that, but maybe you can emotionally say, is Trump good or bad, do you think, for Ukraine? I know we have to wait and see.
Well,
I
first,
know.
yeah, sure. First of all, the Ukrainians survived the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, all those atrocities, and the war with Russia since 2014. So we have no other choice but to be optimistic about our fate, our sovereignty, and about beloved state. And yes, there are some sympathizers of Mr. Trump and his ideas, and they believe that he is capable of bringing peace to Ukraine. And for sure, he is the one who is not going to be shy to kick the Russians in some instances. For example, he will unleash the energy sector of the United States and flood in the American and foreign markets with the American oil, and then rapprochement with MBS in Saudi Arabia would do the same, and it means that less money would have Putin for his war efforts in Ukraine. And there are some other good ideas that Trump is going to implement right away after he's in office. But from the other hand, what we heard from him personally and from G.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, and some other people around Trump are not encouraging us. And I believe that it's let's say, challenge for Ukraine to reshape this thinking and
Right.
to rely on European partners to convey that it's not going to work, it's not going to fly with regard to Ukraine, because this war is not about territory. It's about the very existence of Ukraine, and it's
Absolutely.
about the security architecture in Europe. So I believe that we can we face challenges. I mean, with Mr. Trump and his
Mm.
ideas. At the same time, there are some windows of opportunity we can explore. And yes, you're right that the Biden administration did a tremendous job supporting Ukraine, but they fall short defining
Exactly.
Ukrainian victory. They fall short supporting this definition of victory, and certainly they were paralyzed by the fear of escalation from Russia, while Russia was escalating each and every time. So
Exactly.
the decisive mood and the character of Mr. Trump may play a positive role for Ukraine if we manage.
Mm.
When I say we, I mean not just Ukraine but our
Right, right.
partners and our friends and allies within the U.S. Congress and the expert society and ordinary Americans. So we can pursue Mr. Trump and his bakers that it's in the interest of the United States to continue supporting Ukraine.
Amen to that. And the last question for tonight, China. Xi Jinping called first to congratulate Mr. Trump. Do you believe this is a sign of sorts?
He understand that it's going to be a difficult relations with the incoming administration as it was before, because Mr. Trump unleashed a huge tariff barriers and in sanctions and a lot of other things. And he see China taking advantage of over the American companies, businesses, and certainly Trump, even though he said that. That Taiwan is not that important. He didn't say that the United States are going to fight for Taiwan in case China decides to invade. But for sure, people around Trump would form his foreign in the security policy to deter China from moving such a doing such a step. So Xi Jinping was doing the right thing just to congratulate this the head of the one of the largest and one of the most powerful states in terms of the military and economy and technology and finance. And certainly he thinks that there is a possibility to have a great bargain with Trump because he failed to do this with Joe Biden. He once said that the world is enough for two nations to share and to strive. And Joseph Biden rejected this proposal because the Democrats are not in mood to restore spheres of influence. They've been talking about the principle or international system based on norms and principles. The Mr. Trump is a bit of different kind, and he may think in these categories, but I'm not sure that Americans would agree on such a thing like
Right,
dividing the world
right.
into two poles.
Well, some things are really encouraging about his cabinet as well. Susie Wiles, for example, and Mike Pompeo as maybe becoming a Secretary of Defense, which is absolutely astonishing for Ukraine, some people say. And these people are very influential people in the United States. I've been talking to them. So you're absolutely right that we just have to wait and see what happens because things that are Trump talking and Trump acting are two different personalities, if you ask me. Do you agree?
Well, yes, for sure, and we've seen it before on many occasions with Trump and with the
There
candidates
we
for
go.
the highest office in the United States. They may propose some ideas, but then they face realities. Because if you're talking about in both cases, in China, in Russia, they will face different actors, not just Russia and Ukraine, but European partners in our case, and the allies of the United States in the region, I mean, South Korea, Japan, Australia, India, and the United Kingdom. So they will shape their strategy taking into account all those factors. It's for sure. But we should wait and see how the new cabinet will be staffed with which people. And certainly, we've seen that when for the first cadency of Mr. Trump, was a bit chaotic and he replaced a lot of figures on the go. So it's going to happen once again with this administration. But anyway, we will see the names of the key positions, and then we can understand the way of thinking of those people, what they are going to advise to Mr. Trump,
Hmm.
what they are going to draw, what kind of decisions they are going to draw for him to take. And we will see how the Chinese and the Russians would react on
Right.
those strategies.
By the way.
So it's far from being settled that Mr. Trump would be able to stop this war in 24 hours in Ukraine, or just to restrain China and to establish a new modus operandi with this economic giant.
Well, I hope that we see, and I hope we have more commands of you as an expert of what is going on, because certainly turmoil in Europe and turmoil in politics, but it doesn't matter. It will end up bad for Ukraine. Let's wait and see. And thank you so very much so far.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We talk soon. Goodbye.
That was it for tonight. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate that indeed. It was me, Henry Keane, yet another attempt with my team at UATV English to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Like, share and comment. Your voice matters as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Please stay safe and tune for more. Goodbye.